Confession is good for the soul, but terribly hard on one's knees. I need to just briefly here confess two slanders, one spoken with my lips and one thought in my heart. In a previous video here on my channel, I not only insinuated but spoke as if it were the truth that if one were using this really magnificent IVP 1662 International Edition Common Prayer Book for morning and evening prayer, that there are only a few instances in which, according to the regular lectionary, you would be reading from the what we consider the Apocrypha in the Protestant Church. And I was really, really wrong. If I'd only taken the time to actually look ahead a tiny bit, in the lectionary, I could easily see that the months of October and November are almost entirely dedicated to books from the deuterocanonical or apocryphal books. And I think further I slandered and said that only the books of wisdom and Sirach were included in the lectionary, and those only on feast days. Yeah, not even close to correct. And those viewers of mine that have this book or use this book that were kind enough not to comment on what a dunderhead I was, thank you for that. But I want to make that correction here. So we see in October, actually it begins at the end of September. Don't know how clear this will be with this poor camera. We have readings beginning here on September 28th, 27th in the evening actually, with Tobit. In October we complete Tobit, we go to Judith, Wisdom, Sirach. In November, Sirach completed, Baruch, Bel and the Dragon, and then we're back to the Protestant canon with Isaiah. So through much of the fall, we are in the Apocrypha, and I somehow completely missed that. This is a lectionary I'm not familiar with. This was the original 1662 that was restored in this. Again, it's a magnificent, wonderful edition, and I highly recommend it. But I didn't want to mislead anyone that this doesn't have you reading from the Apocrypha when it clearly does, and quite a bit. Still a beautiful, wonderful book, and pleased to have it. If you don't like that lectionary, there are alternate lectionaries in the back that you could choose instead, or use another lectionary you found. Another side comment, the white ribbons that I did on camera and put in this book were just horrible, awful quality ribbons, and I immediately swapped them out. These are donor ribbons from ones I had added to a New American Bible. Really beautiful Bible, but a translation that I can't see myself ever really going to. So these were pulled from that Bible and added to this, where they're going to be much more useful. That was the first slander. The second was only thought in my heart, but I felt the need to confess. Brief interesting aside here. You can see that in the lectionary, we've been reading here in February from the book of Exodus, and I knew they cut out some sections of the Mosaic Law in the books of Moses, but fascinating to me where they cut and what they jumped to. So on February 10, we were reading Exodus 33 in the morning, Exodus 34 in the evening, and then February 11 jumps over the rest of Exodus and the beginning of Leviticus and jumps to chapter 18 of Leviticus. which if you look at Leviticus 18, you see here that it covers all of the rules for conjugal relationships, or these people are okay to marry, these people are not okay to marry. And I guess fascinating to think why the Church of England would want to jump ahead to this spot, as if they were saying, let's not have any more Henry VIII, Catherine of Aragon type situations. Let's nail this down early, make sure we got that covered before we move on. And if perhaps you think I'm wrong in my assessment and that's not what the prayer book compilers were thinking, this is a different edition of the prayer book. This is the Cambridge. But at the very end, the very last thing they have to say after the ratification is a table of kindred and affinity, wherein whosoever are related are forbidden by the Church of England to marry together. And there's a chart that you can look it up to see, is this going to be okay or not? Like any future King Henry can't say, well, I didn't realize that wasn't copacetic. It's in the book. Look it up. The second slander, the slander of the heart, has to do with this Jerusalem Bible, which I've been using, and I've mentioned before, was a translation I didn't know much about. It's been on my shelf since I found it at the Goodwill for free sometime last fall, but was encouraged to begin using it when the apocryphal books came up in my lectionary, and just haven't switched back because I like the translation. It's an interesting fresh look, I guess, at some familiar scriptures. Get this focus right. But so I commented before that I like the layout of this book. I think it's easy on the eyes, even though the print is not extremely big or extremely dark, and there is some unevenness in it, in this print run at least, where some of the print is very dark, and even on one page you can see it. Too bad you can't see this with my poor camera, but kind of darker ink here, and it gets lighter as you go toward the bottom. Still not so much that I can't read it, and I am one of the League of the Bifocal, so I have trouble anyway, but yeah, I can read it okay. It's laid out a lot like a sort of a reader's edition, like a quasi-reader's edition. So it's obviously not two columns, it's a single column, and the chapter or the verse numbers are off to the left, and there's a dot on the line that tells you where the next verse begins on that line. So, apart from the dot, maybe that would be a distraction for some. It's not for me, but it's pretty much like a paragraph. But it does have these bold section headings, which I find useful, and the chapter numbers are, in most cases, really big and easy to find. In my lectionary reading recently, here's where the slander comes in. I was wondering why the Jerusalem Bible had omitted chapter 6 of 2 Corinthians. This is what came up in the lectionary reading. So we clearly have 2 Corinthians 5 and 2 Corinthians 7. Why had they taken chapter 6 out? Luckily, I came to my senses after a few moments and realized that chapter 6 is hidden right here. So when they produced this translation, or at least this layout of this translation, if the chapter break comes in a spot where they believe it's part of the same paragraph or the same thought or the same section, The chapter heading is in much smaller type, still bold, but very hard to find if you don't know where to look for it. It looks more like a verse number. Probably not seeing that at all. Maybe I'll put a still picture. But so, just found that really odd. I find the layout very easy to read, and because the lectionary in that IVP Common Prayer Book is laid out so you're reading basically one chapter of each of the books that you're reading that day, a total of 4 chapters per day, an Old Testament and a New Testament chapter in the morning, an Old Testament chapter and a New Testament chapter in the evening, and some Psalms also. But because in general, the vast majority of the time you're reading, I don't want to say anything is always the case because I'll have to make another confession video, but in the vast majority of instances you're reading an entire chapter. So the fact that the verse numbers are hidden here in the gutter and a little bit hard to see, small, didn't bother me as long as I could easily find the chapter numbers, which for the most part is easy unless it's hidden in the middle of the text like this. So had a brief moment where I had to go digging, but yeah, I apologize for originally thinking that the translators of the Jerusalem Bible had just cut out an entire chapter of 2 Corinthians. So those are my confessions for today. I'm sure there will be an update at some point in the future. By the way, I still am liking this translation. Just for instance, on this same page, just the way they've translated it just gives you a kind of a fresh look at this familiar passage. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, for we know that when the tent that we live in on earth is folded up, there is a house built by God for us, an everlasting home, not made by human hands in the heavens. In this present state, it is true, we groan as we wait, with longing to put on our heavenly home over the other. We should like to be found wearing clothes and not without them. Yes, we groan and find it a burden, being still in this tent. Not that we want to strip it off, but to put the second garment over it, and to have what must die taken up into life. This is the purpose for which God made us, and he has given us the pledge of the Spirit. I don't know, I like it. It's a different look, like I said, of a familiar passage. So, still plugging away in the Jerusalem Bible. Haven't switched back to King James. And maybe I'll try a few other translations this way because it's been a nice introduction to this. Thanks for joining me for this brief apology and confession edition. Maybe I'll see you again here next time.